All right, welcome everybody to according to Andrew number 6, my ideas in review. So basically, since I started watching Owen Benjamin and kind of rethinking a lot of what I took for granted back, um, like basically with the 2016 election. So I guess to give people a little bit of backstory, um, I there's aspects of me that have kind of always I can't say I've always been like a consistent person, but like have been like logical problems, and in general, I have a logical brain, and so there's things that have kind of popped up over the years that kind of have had moments where I've been like outside the matrix kind of thing, right? Like I was still blue pilled, right? But like there was little snippets where I would kind of break. It'd be a flash. There'd be a little glitch in the matrix where I would kind of see things for what they were, or like something wouldn't make sense, and they just like I would have to kind of try to make sense of it, and I would construct some kind of way so that I created a structure that it made sense. And so you'll see some of that with some of the ideas that I bring up today, with some of my older stuff. But basically, what really started me on kind of rethinking everything that I had assumed was that Donald Trump won the presidency. And everyone had said, there's no way he's going to win. Nothing's blah, blah, blah. I knew one guy that was going to vote for him. Um, and he he's kind of like, he's a good guy, but um, he's very much like a pack animal kind of person. Like like he's he goes with the group kind of thing. So um, it was kind of surprising to see him be like the only one who was like, yeah, I'm totally going for this guy. Uh, and then Donald Trump won, and I was like, what is going on? Like this doesn't make any sense. And it kind of like broke my brain. Um, and I didn't vote in 2016, mainly because of like a lot of moving reasons and stuff like that. Um, and I wasn't really happy with either candidate, but I think I was just gonna kind of be like, yeah, whatever. Hillary's not the worst thing in the world, I guess. But hindsight, that's a terrible opinion to have. But um, yeah, so that all that stuff was going on, and I didn't get like my paperwork in and stuff like that because I was busy with grad school and I was trying to focus on that and I didn't really care that much. But that happened, and it was really it was one of the people I was living with was like super liberal. He still kind of is. I haven't talked to him in a while, so I don't know if things have changed um, from his perspective, but uh, like it was really funny because our Wi-Fi password was hashtag Trump for Prez 2016. It was supposed to be like a sarcastic joke kind of thing, like no one will guess this because no one thinks he's gonna win kind of thing. He's gonna get blown out, and he's just a buffoon kind of thing. And then he won, and it was like, okay, something's up here. And like I didn't really watch like media and stuff like that, or take in a lot of that stuff, but like I kind of agreed with a tacit amount of it. Um, so that was one aspect of it, and then the other aspect of it was, um, I basically ended up debating one of my friends um, about I think it was healthcare at the time, and I didn't know much about it, and I was doing the classic liberal thing where I was just like, everyone thinks this, and then he's like, I think something else, and he like, ah, Dave Smith describes it really well, where it's um, people who have ideas that are outside the normal framework have to debate them and um, demonstrate them constantly. They're like, all right, well, this is what I believe. And it's like so outside the or beyond the pale kind of thing for a lot of normal people that you'll get attacked for it. But then like that forces you to have to be like, well, this is why I believe it and like defend it. And then you get really good at defending that stuff. That's actually one of the reasons I'm doing this podcast is because Um, and like me and Nate started the Nathan and Andrew podcast because uh, it like if you don't kind of discuss these things, you lose your sharpness. So that was one thing. Um, I was kind of bouncing these ideas around in my head when I was working, and kind of doing that stuff. I'm jumping around the timeline a little bit here, but basically, me and Nate would argue back and forth about this stuff all the time, and it was really interesting, and it really kind of kept me mentally sharp and stuff like that. And so I wanted to use this as a way to kind of keep that mental sharpness going. So where was I? So yeah, Donald Trump kind of broke the matrix for me. But it took a while to get through all that stuff, and then I had this debate with my other buddy, and he just destroyed me, and it pissed me off. And I was like, "There's no way this stuff he's saying is true. Like this stuff's total bullshit." Um, and there was like another guy that was kind of there that was on his side nominally. He didn't really contribute much to the discussion, but he said something about libertarianism. I hadn't really heard that term before. Uh, and it was one of, and then like after it, I was like, you think of like all the good comebacks like after the debate, as it were, and it wasn't like a formal debate. We were just discussing stuff, and like this is a point of contention, and we kind of went back and forth, and I got my ass handed to me. So I was like, all right, well, I'm gonna destroy this guy. I'm gonna like do all this research. I'm gonna prove him wrong, and you know how that usually goes. Where the person that's much more educated on the thing, you're like, I'm gonna research this person, I'm gonna prove them wrong, and then you do all the research and stuff like that, and then slowly turn to their point. This is kind of what endeared me to Vox over time as well, Vox Day, uh, where he was kind of saying stuff that was very different as well, um, and especially in his like demeanor and stuff like that, where he's like, I know I'm right and I know I'm smarter than all of you, and like when you're not used to it, it's kind of off-putting. But then like once you get used to it and you know he's right, it's like really endearing, at least to me. It's like, yeah, like you are right. It's great, and um, it's like kind of the same thing. Like when you don't know they're really good at something, it sounds like arrogant and foolhardy and stuff like that. But then like when you do know that thing, it's like when people get mad about it, it just kind of baffles me. It's like the same idea that where people get like mad at like Usain Bolt for being arrogant that there's certain types of people. Well, they'll get mad if Usain Bolt says I'm the fastest man in the world, and they're like, oh, he's so cocky. It's like he literally has the world record proving he is the fastest man in the world. In fact, not even in the world of all time. Uh, so it's just like the whole jealousy thing is just ridiculous. But anyway, as I digress, so we had this discussion. I kind of started getting into stuff, got more and more red pilled on stuff. Ended up finding Owen Benjamin through Crowder, and um, and then I think I stumbled across his N word video, like what's the big deal with the N word? I think is what it was called. Watched that, and then slowly just kind of ended up stumbling into his streams after a certain amount of time. Uh, and yeah, basically what happened is I would watch Crowder's thing, and he would be like the most entertaining part about it. And he also like as I started watching his streams, he was it was like I would watch like Crowder and like maybe part of the problem and stuff like that. And then a lot of these places I started watching because like they would have Owen Benjamin on. I was watching like Rogan and stuff too. And then um and then I was like, well, I want to watch more of this guy, and then that's how I found his stream. Um, anyway, so yeah, so I basically had my mind broken. I had to kind of figure everything out, started doing a lot of research. And when I say research, just kind of like learning things, watching fun videos, just kind of like picking up things here and there. And you'll see like how a lot of my thoughts have developed over this time period as we read through some of these questions. So some of them are going to be like much more recent, and so they're probably not going to be that as out there, but I thought they were interesting questions to dive into. But oh, here's like who. So here's one of the earliest things that I wrote down that I was able to find at least. And this just kind of shows you. This is like a classic conservative Civ Nat type outlook on the world, right? So my thought process was, could we destroy or eliminate autocratic dictatorships by introducing a trading policy? The idea is once open trade becomes available and people have more freedom, autocracies will have a harder time staying in power because with a free market comes the desire for democratic representation. Don't know why I thought those two things were correlated. Uh, in short, uh, use the idea that politics is downstream from culture to change culture by importing freedom via free markets to change the political system. Sell the idea of oh, never mind, that's a different question. Um, so what's wrong with this? So we assume that all cultures are the same and that they want to be ruled over in the exact same way. So that's issue number one. Um, issue number two is that things only flow one direction, right? So we're going to basically start having an exchange of ideas, and we assume the democratic ideas are going to be the same, and that kind of flows back into the first one where um, all thoughts are the same, kind of thing. Um, then what else we got in here? So politics is downstream from culture. That I do still agree with. Um, and but like this uh, there's like this part of it where it's all this unchanneled freedom. It's this the idea that any freedom is good freedom, and that the the core thing that we should be striving for is freedom, right? Instead of um, kind of seeing that true freedom lies in uh, restricting your will to uh, that of God's, and therefore being able to live a fruitful life, if that makes sense. Do do do. Um, one, two. Okay, so I think that covers that. Also, okay, I guess one other aspect of it is we get into this whole free trade thing, and so I don't agree with free trade anymore because uh, free trade leads to labor mobility, which then undermines the national worker and stuff like that. It's one of the major issues that America is facing right now. And as a example of this whole idea just straight up not working, you have China. Um, yeah. Now there are the thing is this kind of marketplace of ideas things early in the like as Europe basically took over the world, a lot of these kind of things were adopted, but they weren't adopted because of the way that Europeans think they were, right? So like Japan kind of latched onto a lot of this stuff pretty early on. Um, but it's not necessarily this whole like freedom and democracy thing. They're like, okay, we want to be, we're Japan and we want to keep ourselves Japan. And if we're gonna do that, we need to adopt the thing. Like we can see that these Europeans are taking over the entire world. So what are they doing that's making them so effective and making it so they can take over the entire world? We need to take those things and adopt them and make it so that and adapt them to the Japanese philosophy. So that's why. So while it kind of looks like this, you're getting the whole European bag with it, and some of the philosophical and stuff like and ideas do kind of come over because when especially like let's take Japan because they were so isolated for so long. Like I think I think they were officially completely isolated for about 200 years, which I believe was from about 1600 to 1860, when um, Perry, Commandant Perry or something like that, um, came into one of the Japanese harbors in a very advanced ship. I think it was an ironclad, maybe. And there's like no way they could defeat it, even though they did have some gunpowder. It's pretty primitive, just because they didn't have any. They had minor skirmishes here and there, but there wasn't any full scale major wars on the islands for most of that 200-year period. maybe even beyond that 200-year period, but I can pretty assuredly say that 200-year period. Um, so okay, so to get back to the point, so they're trying to adopt all these ideas, right? And they're trying to figure out, okay, these Europeans are really powerful, and some of the stuff's really obvious. Okay, they have these guns, they use them in this manner, and it's very, very effective. Okay, we want to adopt that, but um, then they have to figure out, you know, to do those kind of drill and tactics and stuff like that. It requires a certain amount of discipline. It requires a certain amount of um, way of thinking and stuff like that. It happens to fit, like uh, line infantry tactics fits really well with Japanese um, thoughts about duty and stuff like that, because it's like you're gonna stand here, you're gonna shoot at those guys, and and if they shoot at you, you're just gonna stand there, and if you get shot and die, that is your duty as a Japanese person to the emperor and as a servant of Japan. Um, and that just kind of fit in with their mentality really well. But so you're bringing all this stuff in, and they're trying to figure out, okay, so the guns and stuff, that's kind of obvious, but what other aspects of this machine make it work, right? Because you have um, Europe had invented the state, and the state basically, which I kind of touched on in the last video, it stripped away the idea of lords and stuff like that, and really centralized um, government and made it so that you basically created a bureaucracy, and that the people in that bureaucracy got a set amount of pay, and then that made it so that uh, you didn't have all these disparate parts kind of collecting taxes and having a bunch of middlemen collecting taxes before it got to the sovereign, and that was able to, uh, with the same tax base, increase revenues by a major degree. And that, in turn, allowed for the growth of um, much, much larger armies in Europe. And so that's an aspect of uh, political structure that the Japanese end up having to adopt. But it's not necessarily obvious that that's what they have to adopt, and that's how it works, and that's why it's going to play out that way. So you're probably going to have to flirt around with ideas of, okay, well, what makes this work? Is it part of the democratic process? Is it part of representation? Is it is it um, is it what are the aspects that make kind of the European system tick, right? Um, they went through industrialization. Industrialization increased the amount of the productive capacity of the nation, which made it so that they could produce more of these arms and uh, basically they could get more uh, economic power and economic prosperity, which brought in more money, and that money could then be taxed, and then therefore the overall tax base was bigger, and then with that larger tax base, you could build a larger army, which then could expand your lands and increase the amount of infrastructure, like railroads and stuff like that, which would then also increase the amount of industrialization and commercialization, which would expand, and you just kind of have this compounding thing. That period is kind of, we're still going through that. We'll see if this whole 2020 economic collapse is the end of it. Probably not. But um, this kind of building and how like and industrialization investment helped kind of fuel um, all the other aspects, and you can kind of see how all these little aspects are integrated and woven together. And but not everyone is, right. You don't necessarily need a democracy. You don't necessarily need representative um, uh, republics and stuff like that. But by the time Japan meets the West, well, I guess not a ton of them are, but it's at least functional, and especially since they're mainly, I think, meeting America, who represents that the most. Um, they kind of got to figure out what's going on, what is necessary, does the democracy part come with the um, the state and the um, financial apparatus that allows you to have a large military, which then allows you to project power, which then allows you to not get invaded and keep yourself safe, because that's the ultimate goal of Japan. um, when they're going through this transformation. So it turns out no, you don't need all that stuff. Um, but it can be seen as why it's not necessarily obvious, even if I didn't necessarily demonstrate that right away. And I guess the way that it demonstrates that it's not necessarily obvious is because of this line of thinking that I had back then when I kind of thought these things. Um, so that kind of covers that. Um, do do do. I am not sure if I want to dive into another topic because that was actually pretty self-contained, pretty nicely self-contained. I could jump into the next thing. The next thing I think is on the Civil War and the Confederacy, and it's kind of relevant because of all the Confederate monuments that are coming down, which I don't agree with. But back then I would have, and this was only like between 2 and 4 years ago, so not that long. Really, really not that long. Um, eh, yeah. Um, I think this is pretty good for a video. I don't want these to be too long, and if I go into something else, it's gonna kind of take away from this one. So, um, I think I'm gonna keep doing this. I'm gonna keep going through some of these things that I've written on previously, and then as I kind of have more ideas and stuff like that, because I mean I already wrote a lot of this stuff, so let's see how my opinions have changed. Let's see if I've answered some of those questions. Um, and stuff like that. And hopefully, that little backstory I gave in the beginning gives you a perspective of where I am coming from on some of these things. Um, anyway, I have been Andrew Norris, um, and this has been According to Andrew. Please share, like, subscribe, follow me on Social Galactic, and I stream these on D Live if you're watching this on YouTube, and post when I'm streaming them on Social Galactic. So follow me there, or follow me via DLive. And yeah, if you have any questions on stuff, or want me to go into a different topic, or go into the same topic in a different light, just leave a comment and explain what you want, and I'll see if I can get to it. But anyway, thank you guys all for listening, and have a good day.